I used to believe that the most painful betrayals were loud, theatrical things, the kind that come with slammed doors and screaming and a moment where the entire world stops long enough for you to see exactly what shattered. But my betrayal was quiet, and because it was quiet, it took me longer to understand it, and even longer to accept that the silence wasn't peace. It was simply the sound of someone leaving you while still living in the same home. I'm 32 now, and I don't say that like it's old, but I say it like it's a number that suddenly feels heavier than it should, because I look back at the last few years and I can see the way I tried to be a good man in small, unglamorous ways, the ways nobody applauds, the ways you do for love without keeping score, until you realize someone else has been keeping score for both of you and you didn't know the game changed. My wife and I had been married 3.5 years. Together longer. We were the kind of couple our friends described as solid, which is a compliment that sounds warm until you hear the emptiness underneath it, because solid often means predictable, and predictable often means invisible, and invisible is exactly what I became, slowly, without noticing, like a piece of furniture you stop seeing because it's always there. We met in the most ordinary way, through a friend of a friend at a small gathering, and I remember being surprised by how easy she was to talk to, how her attention felt like sunlight, and how she laughed at my jokes like she actually meant it, not like she was being polite, and when she touched my arm, just lightly, as if she was checking something true, my whole body reacted, because I hadn't realized how long I'd been lonely before her. She was ambitious, organized, sharp in that clean way some people are, like their minds have neatly labeled drawers, and I admired that because my own brain has always been more like a garage where things work, but you don't always know where you put the wrench. I worked in technical sales and consulting, a job that asked me to travel sometimes and asked me to be available, almost always, and she worked in a corporate environment where the language was all about performance and visibility and growth, and at first it felt like we were building something together, two people pushing in the same direction, shoulder to shoulder. Our early marriage was good. Not perfect, but real. We had routines that felt like home, Sunday mornings where we stayed in bed longer than we should, her hair spread across the pillow, the smell of coffee drifting in from the kitchen because one of us always got up first, and weeknights where we ate on the couch and watched something half interesting because what mattered wasn't the show, it was being close enough that our knees touched, close enough that the world outside our apartment felt far away. Then her job started changing. It didn't happen all at once, and that's part of why it took me so long to understand, because nothing in our life exploded, it simply thinned out, like warm soup that someone keeps adding water to until you're still drinking it, still calling it soup, even though it barely has taste. She began staying later, and at first it made sense, because she had projects, and presentations, and the kind of deadlines that come with moving up, and I wanted to be supportive, because I believed in her, and because there is a particular pride you feel when the person you love is becoming more of who they wanted to be. I started doing more at home, not because she asked, but because I thought that was what partnership was, and I remember thinking, in a strange way, that I was proving something to the universe, like if I was steady enough, if I was patient enough, then whatever stress was pulling at us would eventually loosen. The sex changed first, but it didn't change in a dramatic way where you can point and say, there. That's when it began. It changed the way seasons change, one day slightly cooler, another day slightly darker, until you find yourself surprised by how cold it feels. She started saying she was tired more often, and I believed her, because she looked tired, and because I didn't want to be the kind of husband who treats intimacy like an obligation. I tried to be gentle about it. I tried to make space. I tried to be romantic in small ways, like buying her favorite pastry on my way home, or leaving a note in her bag, or running her a bath when she came in late, but those gestures began to land like paper airplanes thrown into wind, drifting down with no response. We argued more, too, but our arguments were circular, exhausting, and strangely bloodless, the kind where you both keep your voice controlled while something inside you is screaming, and when I would say, "I miss you," she would respond with something about work, and when I would say, "Can we have one evening together?" she would ask why I was being unreasonable, and even in those moments I still wanted to believe it was temporary. The first real crack, the first moment where my body reacted before my mind had a chance to smooth it over, happened on a Tuesday, so ordinary it felt like the universe was mocking me. She had asked me to grab something from her car, a tote bag she'd left in the back seat. I opened the door, leaned in, and saw a hotel key card in the side pocket of the passenger door, half hidden like it had slipped there accidentally, and at first I told myself it must be from a work conference, from some event, from some situation where she didn't want to carry too much, but the card didn't have a conference logo, it wasn't labeled, and my fingers hesitated as if the plastic could burn me. I stared at it longer than I should have, long enough that a simpler man would have stormed back inside, held it up, demanded answers, and part of me wanted to do exactly that, because anger is easier than fear, and confrontation is easier than living with a question that has teeth. But I didn't. Instead, I put the card in my pocket, walked upstairs, set the tote bag on the counter, and returned the card to the exact place I found it, because some instinct told me that if I forced the truth too soon, she would lie, and if she lied, I would have to decide whether to believe her, and I wasn't ready to be that man yet, the man who watches his own dignity get negotiated. That night I barely spoke. She didn't notice. Or maybe she noticed and chose not to ask. She moved around the apartment like someone who had already checked out emotionally, and it struck me how strange it is that you can live with someone for years and still not know what they're thinking, because you assume love equals access, and one day you realize love does not guarantee anything except your willingness to be hurt. Over the next week, I paid attention in a way that felt unnatural. I hated it. It made me feel like I was turning into someone I wouldn't respect, a man who watches, who calculates, who reads meaning into small things, but once the suspicion is inside you, it doesn't stay in one corner, it spreads, it attaches itself to everything, to silence, to timing, to the way someone's eyes move when you ask a simple question. One evening she came home and went straight to the bathroom with her phone in her hand. Another night she left it face down, but when it buzzed her whole posture tightened for a second, the way people react when their name is called unexpectedly. I tried to convince myself it was stress, because I wanted the world where she was just overwhelmed, not the world where she had chosen someone else. The second crack came from something stupid, a smart watch. I had bought her one as a gift months earlier, back when we still smiled easily at each other. We had set it up together, and because we were both tech-minded, we'd paired it to a shared tablet we used sometimes for streaming in the kitchen. Most days the tablet sat in a drawer, dead battery, forgotten. But one evening, while I was cleaning, I found it, plugged it in, and left it on the counter to charge. She was in the shower. The screen lit up with a notification. A message preview. Not explicit. Not pornographic. Not a dramatic smoking gun. Just a sentence that landed like a stone. Same hotel as last time? I missed the way you looked at me. My brain did something strange in that moment, like it tried to unsee the words, like it tried to protect me by turning reality into fog, but my body knew, my heart knew, the part of me that still wanted to believe in us knew, and in the space of 3 seconds I understood that my marriage had been happening on 2 different timelines, and I had only been living in one of them. I didn't move. I didn't breathe properly. I felt heat behind my eyes, and not the kind that leads to tears, the kind that leads to a numbness so complete it feels like someone turned the volume down on your life. When she came out of the bathroom, towel around her hair, she looked relaxed, almost cheerful, and it was like watching an actor step into a scene where the audience already knows the ending. She kissed my cheek. She asked what I wanted for dinner. She glanced at the tablet and didn't react, because she didn't know what it had shown me, or maybe she assumed I would never check, because I was her husband, and husbands are supposed to be safe, predictable, harmless. I smiled. I nodded. I said I wasn't very hungry. That night, lying beside her, listening to her breathe, I understood something about betrayal that I never understood before. It isn't only the act, it is the performance afterward, the way someone can lay next to you with the same face they use at work, the same face they use with strangers, And it makes you question not only them, but yourself, because you start wondering how you could have loved someone who can do that. And what it says about your own ability to see reality. I didn't confront her the next day. Or the day after that. Instead, I planned. Not in a vengeful way. Not in a dramatic way. In a quiet, survival way, the way you plan when you've realized that the ground under your feet isn't stable, and you need to step off before you fall. I called a lawyer from my car during lunch and asked questions in a calm voice that didn't match what was happening inside me. I opened a new bank account and began redirecting my paycheck. I gathered documents slowly, passport, birth certificate, the things that make you you. I did it like a thief in my own life, moving carefully so I wouldn't trigger suspicion. A week later, I did something that surprised even me. I cooked again. Not because I wanted to win her back. Not because I thought love could still be negotiated. I cooked because I wanted to see her face when she realized I was still capable of tenderness, even after knowing what I knew. It was a strange experiment, and maybe that's ugly to admit, but grief does strange things to your sense of morality. It makes you want small moments of power, not to hurt them, but to remind yourself you exist. I made a meal she loved. I set the table. I lit candles. I didn't do it with desperation. I did it with calm. She came home, saw everything, and smiled, genuinely, as if this was a sweet surprise, and for a second I felt the old ache, the memory of what we were, and it hit me so hard I almost believed I could still return to ignorance if I wanted. Then she said gently, like she was talking to a coworker, "This is so lovely. I hate to do this, but I have a quick dinner meeting. I'll be back soon." The words were polite, but the choice behind them was brutal. I watched her change clothes. I watched her apply makeup with that practiced hand. I watched her adjust her hair, the way people do when they're about to be seen by someone they want to impress. I asked softly, "Do you even want to be here anymore?" And she paused just long enough to make me hope. Then she sighed, like I was inconvenient, and said, "Please don't start. It's been a long week." In that moment, something inside me became simple. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg. I didn't accuse. I just said, "Have a good meeting." She left. I waited 5 minutes, then I left too. I didn't follow her to catch her. I already had enough. What I needed now wasn't proof. It was closure, and closure doesn't come from watching them kiss someone else. Closure comes from making the decision to stop handing your life to a person who treats it like background noise. I drove out of the city, out past the last familiar lights, until the roads began to curve and the air felt cooler, and I parked at a lookout where you could see hills rolling into darkness like waves frozen in time. I sat there for a long time, hands on the steering wheel, and I did something I hadn't allowed myself to do yet. I cried. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly, the way grown men cry when they've been trying to be strong for so long that the tears feel like betrayal too, like your body is admitting what your pride tried to deny. I thought about our first year together, how she used to fall asleep on my chest and breathe like she belonged there. I thought about the way I defended her to my friends when they joked that corporate life changes people. I thought about the mornings I left for work and kissed her forehead while she slept, believing that gesture mattered. And I realized the most painful thing wasn't that she had slept with someone else. The most painful thing was that she had chosen a life where my love was useful, but not precious. A few days later, I found a place. It wasn't a trailer. It wasn't dramatic. It was a small rented cottage outside a coastal town, the kind of place people go to reset, where the ocean air makes your lungs feel new and the nights are quiet enough that you can hear your own thoughts, whether you want to or not. I moved in slowly. I told no one except my lawyer and one friend I trusted, a friend who understood that sometimes survival requires secrecy. I didn't take shared furniture. I didn't take sentimental items. I took only what was mine and left the rest behind, because I didn't want her to be able to claim I stole anything except my own life. The day I finally left, I didn't leave a long letter. I left 2 things on the kitchen table, my wedding ring, and a small note that said, I saw the message. I'm not asking for explanations. I'm choosing peace. Then I turned my phone off. When I arrived at the cottage, I opened every window, let the sea air flood the rooms, and for the first time in months my chest loosened, not because I was happy, but because I was no longer pretending. The next week, my phone became a storm. Voicemails, texts, emails, missed calls from her mother, from a number I didn't recognize, probably someone she convinced to help her, because when people are caught, they don't only chase forgiveness, they chase control. Her first messages were confused, then angry, then sweet, then desperate. She said things like, "Where are you?" and "This isn't funny," and "We need to talk like adults." And then later, "I'm sorry if I made you feel neglected," which is the kind of apology that doesn't apologize for the act, only for your reaction. Then, finally, days later, she wrote something that was closer to truth than anything she'd said in months. She admitted it. Not in a sentence filled with remorse, not in a confession that sounded like accountability, but in a way that sounded like a negotiation, like she was offering me a piece of the truth in exchange for my return. It didn't move me, because by then, I had already grieved the marriage I thought I had, and the person who betrayed you always tries to show up after you've done the hardest part alone, and they call it love, but it isn't love, it's fear of consequences. I responded once, with a single message. "Please respect my silence." Then I changed my number. The divorce happened on paper. Quick, clean, almost clinical. I signed things in an office with neutral walls and polite smiles. I didn't look for closure in the room where people file paperwork. I looked for closure in my own quiet mornings, when I ran along the coastline and felt my body become mine again, when my breath came easier, when I realized that grief doesn't vanish, it simply makes room for other things. Months passed. I built routines. I learned which bakery opened earliest. I made coffee the same way every morning. I worked remotely, sometimes from a small table near the window, watching fishermen return with their boats like life still made sense somewhere. I didn't rush into dating. Not because I didn't want companionship, but because I didn't trust my own hunger yet, and I've learned that loneliness can push you into arms that feel warm but aren't safe. Then, one afternoon, the past found me anyway. I was in town, at a small market, buying groceries, when I heard my name spoken the way only someone who once owned your heart can speak it, like it's a key. I turned. There she was. She looked different. Not just older, not just tired. Different in a way that suggested life had hit her harder than she expected. Her posture was less confident. Her eyes were sharp with something that looked like rehearsed courage. For a second, my body reacted like it used to, a reflex, because your nervous system remembers what your mind tries to forget, and then that reflex died, because I didn't feel love, I didn't feel rage, I felt distance, clean and calm, like a shoreline after the tide pulls back. She walked toward me slowly, hands open, as if approaching a stray animal. "Please," she said, and her voice cracked. "Just give me 5 minutes." I should have walked away. That would have been easy. But something in me, something human, wanted to see her without the power she used to have, wanted to look at her and confirm that the worst part was over. We sat on a bench near the water, where the wind carried salt and the sound of gulls made everything feel oddly ordinary. She told me she had lost her job. Not directly fired, but pushed out, quietly, the way companies punish people without admitting they punish them. She told me the man she'd been with had blamed her when rumors spread. She told me she had tried to rebuild her life and discovered that the person she became during the affair didn't fit anywhere anymore, not at work, not with friends, not even in her own skin. She cried. She apologized. She said words like mistake, and confused, and lonely. And part of me watched her like you watch a stranger tell you a story you once lived, and I realized this is what betrayal does. It creates two separate realities, and by the time they want to share a reality again, you're no longer the same person. Then she said the thing she thought would reopen the door. "I still love you," she whispered, and it sounded sincere, and that sincerity might have mattered once, but sincerity after destruction is like a bandage offered after you've already bled out. I looked at her for a long moment, not to punish her, but to be sure. And I said quietly, "I believe you think you love me. But love doesn't do what you did. Love doesn't lie to someone's face and sleep beside them like nothing happened. Love doesn't make a home feel unsafe." She flinched, like the words were physical. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult her. I didn't call her names. I just told the truth, the simplest truth that had taken me months to earn. I don't hate you. I don't want revenge. I just don't want my life tied to yours anymore. She asked, trembling, "Is there any chance? In a year? In 5? And that's where the deepest moment arrived, the moment I didn't expect, the moment that proved to me I had actually healed in a way I couldn't measure until it was tested. Because I didn't answer from anger. I answered from self-respect. I said, "You're asking me to imagine trusting you again, and I can't, because trust isn't a feeling, it's a structure, and you burned it down, and you can't live in the same house after it's ash, not because you're cruel, but because the ground is gone." Her face collapsed, and she cried the way people cry when they realize consequences are real, and for a second, I felt a pull, not love, but pity, and pity is dangerous, because it can make you confuse compassion with obligation. So I stood up. I told her gently, "I hope you build something better from this." "I really do." She reached for my hand. I didn't give it. And then I walked away, not fast, not dramatic, just steady, and as I walked I realized something that made my throat tighten. The reason I left quietly wasn't because I was weak, it was because my love had been honest, and honest love doesn't need a performance when it ends, it needs a boundary. That night, back at the cottage, I made tea and sat by the open window, listening to the ocean, and for the first time since the day I read that message preview on the tablet, I felt nothing sharp inside me, only a calm sadness, the kind that doesn't cut, the kind that simply reminds you you're human. I didn't win. I didn't get even. I didn't humiliate her. I reclaimed myself. If you're reading this because you feel the ground shifting under your own life, because you sense the kind of silence that isn't peace, I won't tell you what to do, because every situation is different and every heart breaks in its own language, but I will tell you this. You don't have to destroy yourself trying to save someone who is already living a separate life. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't confronting them. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leaving quietly, and choosing a life that doesn't require you to beg to be loved. Some stories don't end with apologies. They end with understanding. If this story felt familiar, you're not alone. Thank you for listening. This was Block Tales.